Did you guys see the Homer story with Joe Rogan? Did you see that story? Homer gets canceled, meets Joe Rogan in a new Simpsons episode. This is a New York Post story. The Simpsons is dividing critics after spoofing controversial podcast host Joe Rogan, 54, in a brand new episode satirizing cancel culture in the divisive season 33, episode 14, titled "You Won't Believe What This Episode Is About." Act 3 will shock you. Homer is erroneously blamed for leaving the family dog named Santa Little Helper in a hot car, resulting in him getting publicly shamed. Newsweek reported things really go off the rails when the Simpsons patriarch tries to apologize and inadvertently knocks Reverend Lovejoy out of the church window. Videos of the fiasco subsequently go viral on social media, causing Homer to lose his job and become ostracized by his family and friends, co-workers. Eventually, the donut gobbler meets up with Joe Rogan, doppelganger. The commentators never explicitly mentioned by name, but he is represented by a generic right-wing podcast host who is the only one willing to meet with Homer following his cancellation. Needless to say, the gap rang hollow with many critics with Screen Rant deeming it's bizarrely misguided and self-contradictory, particularly problematic per side with the fact that Homer was undeserving of his excommunication, presumably unlikely many so-called victims of cancel culture. So what do you think about this? By the way, does that even look like Joe Rogan? Does he look like kind of Joe a little bit?
Yeah. I like how they just said, we're not going to name him.
Right-wing podcast.
Right-wing podcast house. Pariah's welcome.
How shall we draw him? Let's draw him like this, and we won't name him.
Yeah. The other day they called Russell Brand a right-wing podcast. Can you imagine calling Russell Brand right-wing Republican podcast? But apparently now Joe Rogan is. A couple of the guys shared a video. It went viral on Twitter about the times Joe has said things that has nothing to do with being right-wing. The only thing he's doing is he's questioning things.
Right.
I think he said one time, Barack Obama's the best president of our generation. Yeah, right-wing guy would never say that. Yeah. They would probably say somebody.
Said he would vote for Bernie.
He would vote for Bernie. He said a bunch of different things. But
such bullshit how they portray him as being right-wing just because he says things that are contradictory to the narrative that is being spoken out there.
It's absolutely true. Look, he just has interesting people on and asks questions, good questions.
And you've been on Rogan how many times?
Yeah, a dozen or so.
Just a dozen times on Rogan. No big deal, Mike Baker, CIA.
Yeah, but he's just curious. He's curious about everything, right? But God forbid you should, have someone say something on your show that somebody else doesn't agree with. The one thing about self-righteous people is I don't know how they're so fucking dry. There's no sense of humor, right? I mean, who the fuck takes exception to a Simpsons episode? I mean, how does that work? So, anyway.
Meanwhile, Joe keeps winning.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because all this you do, you're all just helping him win. The mainstream media doesn't even know it. They're officially Joe Rogan's best publicist. And the great news is he has to pay them nothing. They're doing it for free. By the way, all this publicity they're doing, do you realize if you were to put a dollar amount of how much the media is shit-talking of him, making videos, saying stuff, how many billions of views it got Joe? And if you were to put a dollar amount on it, I'm going to speculate on what that dollar amount is. If Joe was running for office and he wanted to buy this viewership, it's probably going to cost him $300 million. So mainstream media just brought Joe Rogan $300 million of free publicity.
By the way,
Joe needs to say thank you to my favorite publicist.
Such a good point.
By the way, this is not new. The same thing happened with Rush Limbaugh. You may remember that there is a small coterie of Democrat congressmen that tried to pass what they called the Hush Rush Act. And he was talking about equal time. And that led Rush on this big campaign where it was, I am equal time. And it actually propelled Rush from the consortium of AM Talk into the whole EIB network. And so it actually was jet fuel on Rush's trajectory. And we see it again 20 years later.
Yep. And by the way, all the news of Rogan getting canceled, you don't hear that as much anymore, right? This reminds me of kind of what Jordan Peterson said. He was sitting in Mike Baker's seat right there. He said, listen, the hardest part to do is deal with it when it's at its worst. When the heat is on you, if you could stick it out, you'll be sitting pretty on the other side. Now, everything that happened with our friends at Spotify and Rumble offering him $100 million. Where's that now?
Yeah, I think
He survived the worst of it.
Neil Young put himself back on Spotify, as it turns out.
Neil Young went back.
Yeah, he went back, and as did, I think, everyone else.
I'd love to see the Neil Young on Joe Rogan podcast coming soon.
Oh, by the way, that would be pretty
Talk about
epic.
views.
Yeah.
God. If there's a guy that could pull it off, he could pull it off to do something like that. If you enjoyed this short clip, click over here to watch another short clip. And if you want to watch the entire episode, the entire podcast, click here.